This tape recording is copyrighted by the Sanatana Dharma Foundation, 2970 Russell Street, Berkeley, California, 94705, United States of America. The following discourse by Yogeshwar Muni is of the Dying, Death, and the After-Death Experience Seminar. It is entitled Discourse Number 2, Dealing with the Moments of Death.
Death. It's not the only alternative. This is the age of the alternative ways of life, right? But there's only two choices: death or immortality. If at the age of 19, or somewhere along the line before the curve gets too steep down toward death, one re-releases the vital energy, as the yogis call it, the prana, and the evolutionary energy, the yogis call the kundalini. And if the body's not too far gone, it will revitalize. And if one is persistent and determined and surrendered enough, the body will reach immortality. That's a short and sweet statement. But there's a lot contained in that. For example, Jesus, at his baptism, the Holy Spirit came into him. The life energy filled his body, filled his mind, and filled his heart. And what was the final outcome? Immortality. Even though he was nailed to the cross, what happened in the end was not death, but immortality. The promise of Jesus was that if you shall believe in me with all your heart and all your mind, you too shall reach immortality. This was not an idle statement, and didn't mean that the soul would go to heaven, although most Christians have understood it that way. And the reason I keep pounding on this subject of Christianity is because we've suffered so greatly from the misunderstandings of what Jesus taught. And I'm trying to correct a few of these things because most of us have been raised in the Christian Judaic tradition. And to liberate ourselves from this, we have to understand as what actually happens with death. Jesus reached immortality. The etheric body is the body. The flesh is not the body. But if we're convinced that death is death, then you will not know what has happened to you and not take advantage of the situation. Death is an opportunity to capitalize, so to speak, on the situation, and great advantage can be taken. However, if one is prepared well in advance, one has already died before the flesh has died. St. Paul said, you shall die of the flesh, and you shall reach everlasting life. That means somewhere in this area here, the dying process is slowly happening. If one just gives up the body and becomes unattached to it, then they have then and there the opportunity to reach that immortality. Jesus reached it And those of you who have read the book Autobiography of a Yogi by Swami Yogananda talks about his guru's guru, who also attained an immortal body. This is traditional in India, not to do this, but it's tradition that this is available for those determined enough and surrendered enough to God and to truth, that immortality in body form, as etheric body, is available. And if we paid any attention at all to the life of Christ, it would be also the tradition in the West. He gave that living example that it can be done. And you shall do even greater things. Even if at the last moment and death is coming, you can snatch victory from the jaws of death. And this is what I want to talk to you about right now, is how that can be done. This very moment, my Guru, Swami Kripaluananda, is this one here, is in that impasse. In the next 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 months, he will either die or he will attain this immortal divine body, which Jesus and Babaji attain. And according to yogic traditions, about 400 or 500 other yogis and yoginis attain. We'll see what happens. His guru, which is this one over here, this is a statue of an immortal body. He's sitting there in some Bhavi Mudra. Immortal body. This is Lakulesh. He's attained this immortal body. We hope sometimes that we can just die and have it be gone. But we worry. Maybe we'll not just sleep. Maybe we'll dream. That's the question. You dream. That question is settled. You do not sleep. You dream. And you can take advantage of the situation of death and grow immeasurably. Number 1, there's a neurotic need on the part of the survivors to try to do something for the dead. Well, I guess this is all right. But what do? They give them some sort of a eulogy, and they give them some sort of a funeral, and maybe a tombstone or a crypt or an urn of ashes. This is fine, but is it really doing very much for the dead? I think that's more of a sop for the living. What about that dead guy? How's he going to make it? Well, this is our concern right now. Well, first of all, as I have mentioned, there should be the decision to die. We covered in the previous talk about realizing that you are a spiritual entity, an individual, not a body, not a mind. We covered that. So given that, the next thing is the decision to die. Now if it's you should, quote, unquote, make up your mind to either live or die. If you're going to live, well, get up and live. If not, decide to die. Face it. Make a clear-cut, clean decision rather than saying, well, I don't know what's going to happen. We'll just let things drift. But if you're going to die, you decide. And if you're helping someone through the death experience, you should help them with that decision, to talk it over. It's different than saying, oh, well, yes, the body's dying. That's one thing. But for you to make a decision, okay, this is it. This is a great aid to the process, because then you quit hanging on. Then you won't go through this interminable coma bit by deciding to die. There is a moment of death. And at that moment, let's have the other chart up. At the moment of death, some interesting things happen. And you should know what they are so that you can be prepared. At the moment of death is the separation of the etheric body, which I've shown here in dotted lines, from the flesh. This happens in meditation if you're surrendered enough. The etheric body will separate from the flesh body. Sometimes this is called astral projection. I use different terms. Because if there's a full severance between the etheric body, which is the actual form of the body itself, and the flesh, death is certain. Now, at the same time, there is an energy field around the body, which is called the aura. This is not the etheric body. The etheric body is of the shape and appearance of the body, only it's perfect. It has no flaws in it. It's beautiful, handsome. It's not overweight or underweight. It's healthy. And it's not blind or limp or old. It appears to be around 19 or 20 years old. But there's also the energy field of the emotions that are there. This is the aura. And at the moment of death, the aura vanishes. It ceases to exist. It dies. There's no more relationship from the body to other parts of life. That's the aura. And that energy field ceases. It's like throwing a switch, pulling a plug. It just goes whoosh, in about a half a second. The aura is gone. I don't know if you've seen people die. But if you have, you notice a definite change. It isn't just that the breathing has ceased. If you have any kind of ability to perceive with your feelings, you can feel that, one, the aura is gone, and two, that nobody's home. The etheric body is pulled out, and the individual has gone with it. Normally, the body, when it's alive, has two different kinds of energy. Masculine on the right side, feminine on the left. These two poles, the positive and the negative, cause the energy flows and keep the body going. But at the moment of death, that polarity ceases. There's no longer a separation between the masculine half and the feminine half of the body. They collapse into a central plane and become cancelled. Now, though the body dies because of this loss of energy, there is that moment of death, of complete and absolute neutrality. At this moment, the mind becomes null. The mind vanishes. The mind is made up of duality, of up and down, here and there, now and then, good and bad, sick and well, and all these dualities that are the structure of the mind. are canceled because the positive and the negative unite and cancel each other, and there's nothing. And the mind is pure, clear, blank. Clear blank, not blank, but clear. The mind has nothing in it. Everything is canceled. The truth is apparent at that moment. The truth with a capital T. Not relative truth, not thoughts, not considerations, not possibilities, not logic, not discussion, not beliefs, not hopes, not anything dealing with the mind in any way, shape, or form, but the pure, shining, clear truth. How everything is, and completely independent of space or time or energy or substance, the truth is self-evident. This happens to every single person who dies, right at the moment of death. At this point, you're one with God. You're one with truth. There's no separation whatsoever. There's one catch. It doesn't last. And most people, the common human, it lasts about a 20th of a second. However, if he knows this is going to happen, he can catch it right then. And in that moment of truth, he can hold on to it and keep it, because the truth is the truth. And it is infinite and timeless. If he knows that this is what's going to happen. Now, a fairly well-developed person in the last 2 or 3 seconds. And a person who is very advanced spiritually, very conscious, it might last 3 or 4 minutes. For a person who is totally evolved, there's no difference between life and death anyway, and it lasts forever. He's already there before the body died, so it doesn't matter. In fact, so far as he's concerned, the body has died long ago. This is what we mean by to die and be reborn. But now we have to take advantage of this moment. This almost instantaneous flash, in most cases, of the total experience of the truth. The Tibetans call it the experiencing of the clear light. When this happens, one has entered the first phase of death. Right here, when death comes, shoof. As I mentioned earlier, one should know that one has died. If you have decided to die, and if you know that this experience of truth is going to happen, then there'll be no doubt in your consciousness that death has occurred. But if you don't make a decision to die, and if you don't know that you are a spiritual entity, and if you don't know that there's going to be this moment of truth, you don't even notice what's happened, as in going to sleep. You ever notice when you go to sleep? You're awake and then you find yourself dreaming. But you never notice when you go to sleep. There's a gap, a bardo. But it's still just you being conscious. And you'll miss this moment. You must not miss this moment if you want to make the best use of the death process. For full liberation can occur at this point. If you can recognize that this sunyata, this void, this clear nothing of full consciousness is the truth, and you weren't instead expecting a man with a white beard sitting on a golden throne on a cloud, then you will be liberated. And there's nothing wrong with men with white beards sitting on a golden throne. That's fine. And if you expect that, that's what you'll get. That's true. But we'll go into that in the next talk, of what happens after the death experience. But right at this moment of death is this truth. And if you can realize that this truth is God, is pure, unformed up consciousness, is the mind without anything in it, is the ocean of tranquility. And because it's so simple, you see, it's total simplicity, there's nothing in it. There's nothing to entertain you like on television. It's like the blank screen on a TV set. It's turned off. There's nothing on it. So why should I watch that? Well, you miss the ultimate. And that is the truth. This is the background upon which all things happen. This is the basis of all life. You can see the TV screen is something on which all those stories happen. Huh? But without the screen, there would be no story. For this moment of death, you have this experience, but it applies to everything. All of life, everything that exists or could exist. And you have that experience of the ground, the substrate of eternal being. But it's no more entertaining than a blank television set. If you have to be entertained, you'll be entertained. Because you'll turn on the set and watch the movie. We'll be going into that next talk. But instead, if you can become absorbed and filled with this truth, this unformed up consciousness, then you will be liberated forever. The mind, which you've taken with you, back to the other chart, we need two. The mind which you take with you around the head of the etheric body will dissipate automatically, and all the memories and images in the mind will go away. If you realize this truth for what it is. And if you don't, instead you'll have to go through the whole morass of the mind. All the TV tapes, all the old movies will have to be replayed. But if you grasp this moment, then the mind will dissipate, leaving the etheric body. There you will be. The etheric body is the immortal body. The only difference between you and someone else who is enlightened is that they don't have a mind. And it's the mind that distorts. It's the mind that is the content of desire. It is the mind that gives you the false images of what is instead of the truth. And drives you back to rebirth. I've got another quote. This is from the Katha Upanishad. He who lacketh discrimination, whose mind is unsteady, and whose heart is impure, never reacheth the goal, but is born again and again. But he who hath discrimination, whose mind is steady, and whose heart is pure, reacheth the goal, and having reached it, is born no more. So even though one has not realized the divine immortal body during their body's life, can have this realization on the point of death, if you're prepared for it, if you know it's coming. The yogis in India in ancient times, trying to explain these principles as I'm explaining them to you now, were successful with a small percentage of the people who they were teaching. And they caught on. They could grasp intellectually this idea that at the point of death there was going to be this moment of truth. But what about the rest of the people who couldn't get this idea? Well, they taught them to say the name of God at the moment of death. So they had, in India, they had different names for God, but they all are just names for God. Ram, Om, Shiva, Adi, and so on and so forth, or the different forms of the goddess, of the Divine Mother, same thing. Parvati, Radha, Kali, Durga, so on. Or you could say Jesus, you could say Allah, you could say Moses. Of course, you don't say it, you think in Judaism. You don't put it into a word. But they would teach them at the moment of death, say Ram, 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 Ram. Mahatma Gandhi, who wasn't even a yogi, but a saint, a political saint, was assassinated by a Hindu who thought Mahatma Gandhi was a fake. Filled him full of bullets. And as he faltered and faded, he said, "I forgive you," to the assassin. Ram, Ram, Ram. Huh? How many Westerners have that kind of guts? Or that kind of truth, that kind of preparation for the moment of death? The idea is that if you're saying the word of God at the moment of death, this tunes the mind to that moment of truth, which is God. No matter what the form of death. Well, people say, now wait a minute. I've been good all my life. I've done the right thing all my life. And this scoundrel, all he has to do is say Ram or Jesus at the moment of death, and he gets a good deal, huh? And I forgot. I couldn't think of it. And now I've got to suffer, huh? Well, there's no explaining the grace of God. You should know, though, that at the moment of death, a great opportunity presents itself. And therefore, one should be ready for it. Say, though, one was in a coma.